All right, let's get the mailbag open here as the Phillies just struggling along. We'll open with this, though, Frank. Who's the Phillies all-star, Frank?
I think it has to be Pat Neshek. He's gone to the All-Star game before as a setup man. He did that with the Cardinals in 2014. I think really he's the only one you can take. Altair's cooled off a little bit, and Hernandez is hurt. But really, who else do you take?
Yeah, I think Altair was the next guy on our list, and followed by Tommy Joseph, I guess, is the third guy. I mean, it's a pretty bleak list, if you ask me. But Neshek, I think, got both of our votes as the guy. I know you were yearning for the days of Von Hayes in 1989.
Well, yeah, that was when Mike Schmidt was elected, but he retired, so they had to take another Philly, and they went with Von Hayes.
Mike Schmidt was hitting 193, I believe, at the time he walked out the door, and he was still an all-star.
Crying in San Francisco.
That's right.
Let's get to the mailbag here, and I love the first question because it has to do with Scott Kingery, and Rich wants to know when the Phillies will call him up. He's gone from Double-A now. He got the promotion to Triple-A.
So it looked like everybody seemed to know that Kingery's promotion was coming. The Phillies had kind of said that they liked the 400 at-bat number for Kingery at Double-A Reading before they moved him. And if you remember, he had about 100 games or so between last season and this season, and that's when they decided to move him up. And if you remember earlier in this season, I sort of said that they probably want him to see a little bit of the pitching in the Eastern League a few times over before they promote him. And I think that kind of takes care of that. But now that he's at AAA, everybody seems to want to know when he might come up to the big leagues. And I think that could depend on a lot of factors. A lot of it depends on who is coming and who is going. Now, certainly we just mentioned Cesar Hernandez. Unfortunately, he's hurt and he's out till the end of July. I don't think they're going to bring him up for that injury. I think the Phillies will just continue to try to patch it together with Howie Kendrick and Andres Blanco and Ty Kelly until they absolutely need to make something else long term. But I think Hernandez will be fine and be back before the trade deadline. But the problem with that is that the Phillies are going to trade somebody like Hernandez. They won't get to really show his value and show that he's healthy before the trade deadline comes. So they're probably going to be using Cesar Hernandez at second base the rest of the season. And if Scott Kingery comes up in September, that might depend on whether or not they have a roster spot for him. We frequently talk about the 40-man logjam, and heading into this offseason, they're going to have to protect some other players. So they might find a situation much like last year with J.P. Crawford, where they actually don't promote Kingery at all, because if they don't, they have no sense of urgency to put him on the 40-man roster otherwise. And that sort of buys them the off-season to try to figure out where everybody else stands and get past that Rule 5 draft and protect as many of their players as possible. So it could be a situation where the Phillies make a bunch of trades and they clear out a bunch of space and they think it's okay to bring him up. But I think we're looking at either September or maybe even not at all.
Frank Klose is with us. The Phillies mailbag is open, and Danielle Nava was the leadoff hitter yesterday, but Mike writing about why is Cameron Perkins starting and leading off at times, and he's frustrated about that. What's your answer for Mike, Frank?
Well, the unfortunate thing is Pete Mackanin doesn't have a whole lot to work with right now. You can pencil in Odubel Herrera and Aaron Altair into the everyday lineup. But beyond that, you have Nava, who, if you look at his numbers, overall they look pretty good, but he's not hitting against as a right-handed batter at all. He's hitting very well against right-handed pitching as a left-handed hitter, but he's not doing so well the other way around. So I think they were a little hesitant to use Nava in those situations, so where I think he's batting .329 as a left-handed hitter and only .200 as a right-handed hitter. So Perkins as the right-handed hitter, when they called him up, they felt like they should use him. And you know what? If you look at this roster as it is now, you have Michael Saunders erased, right? They released him. Howie Kendrick was a starting outfielder, and then he ended up starting at second base, and then now he's hurt too. So really, of Nava, who we mentioned, who's struggling as a hitter from that side, the right side, you look at the roster and say, all right, well, that means two of Ty Kelly, Andres Blanco, Brock Stassi, Nava, or Perkins have to start every single day. So I think at this point, Pete Mackanin just kind of threw his hands in the air and said, well, I have to use him. So he had a good on-base percentage at AAA, so let's give it a shot. And unfortunately, there really aren't a lot of options, and the Phillies seem still very hesitant to call up Dylan Cousins or Nick Williams, who would be a left-handed bat that could play the outfield every day. And since they're not bringing them up, I mean, I even wonder if Pete Mackanin is just sort of doing that to sort of take a shot at the front office, saying, hey, well, this is what you're giving me, so this is what I'm going to play.
Let me ask you, before we move on to Rebecca's question here, because it kind of goes to where the team is, but how do you think Pete has done as the manager? I mean, it's not like he's got a lot of talent. I get that. But this team seems like it's taking step backwards. There's a lot of people suggesting that the development is on the manager and that these guys aren't developing. You've got, Franco is on the trade block, apparently, that they are listening. They will entertain any offers for him. I mean, how do you view Pete's role in the way this season has gone?
It's a shame. I think a lot of it he can't do anything about. A few statements he's made I found a little bit curious. I think one time after a game they asked him about when some reinforcements might come up from the minor leagues, and he sort of talked around that question in a way that seemed to suggest that he wants the Dylan Cousins right now. He wants Nick Williams right now, but he sort of said, well, that's the type of thing that speaking of Matt Klentak, has to make a call on, and hopefully that'll. He almost said like hopefully that'll happen soon. So I think he's frustrated with what he has to work with. I think he's frustrated with how it's going. I always tended to think that the coaches would go before Pete Mackanin would. For the most part, I think he's doing what he can with what he has and trying to remain patient. And Larry Boa, there was an interview in the Philadelphia Inquirer a couple days ago where Larry Boa was basically saying, yeah, the players are still playing hard, even though the performance isn't there. But he's really kind of boxed in. And I know earlier you were talking about Odubel Herrera's mental miscues, but he's not even in a situation where he can bench him because who's going to play? You have Howie Kendrick hurt. You have Cam Perkins as kind of your backup center fielder at the moment, and then if he's in center, then you probably have to throw somebody in left that shouldn't be playing there either. So he's in a tough spot. I think it's kind of unfair to blame him, but it could be something that he ends up paying the price for eventually.
Well, that leads perfectly into Rebecca's question, Frank, which is that we're about a month away from the trade deadline, and what moves would you make if you were the GM, Frank, to stabilize the Phillies right now?
Yeah, there's two moves I think that they could make that'd be helpful. The first one would be to find a veteran reliever that they can just put at the back of the bullpen and say, you're the closer, period, end of story. And one name that I think is, not for sentimental reasons, but a name that might be available would be Ryan Madson, who could fill that role. Now, he is a very highly paid setup man for the Oakland Athletics right now, and frequently his name ends up in trade chatter. And the thing about Madson is he signed a 3-year, $22 million contract with the Athletics prior to last season. So that means this season and next he's due to make $7 or $8 million each, maybe even a little bit north of that. So the A's paid a high price for him. When teams are out looking for relievers like the Nationals, who are absolutely desperate right now, I don't see them having the financial wherewithal to just assume the full contract. So Madsen might be somebody where the Phillies can do what they did with Hellickson and say, well, we need some stability, so we're just going to pay the money and just eat it and try to create that stability. And I think Madsen is the kind of guy that can do that. Now, the other place I would do it is behind the plate. If you can find a veteran backstop that could serve as a mentor to Andrew Knapp, that could eventually serve as a mentor to Jorge Alfaro and kind of get this pitch calling in order. Now, I find it very curious the extent that we're seeing Cameron Rupp and the coaching staff sort of blow up. I don't know if you noticed in the broadcast the other night, there was actually some video of both Bob McClure, the pitching coach, and Rick Kranix, the assistant pitching coach, kind of speaking very candidly to Cameron Rupp about his pitch calling. And I think if the pitch calling goes wrong, that affects the pitchers, it affects the team as a whole, and certainly is frustrating the coaching staff. So I would try to make a change there. Try to find a veteran, somebody. I don't know if the Cubs will give him up, but like Miguel Montoro might be a good example of a veteran catcher who can hit a little bit and who can be that steadying force. It's kind of funny. It's kind of a shame Chooch isn't around. I don't think they're going to go that route again, but somebody who's a veteran that you can acquire from another team without giving up too much, that could kind of get things in line. And he could be there in addition to Cameron Rupp or instead of Cameron Rupp. But I think the catching position is one where you can get a veteran, which, without Michael Saunders giving them anything at all, and with Howie Kendrick being injured and probably being traded, you really need a veteran in that lineup every day.
Hey, Frank, we're talking with Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, at Frank Klose with a K on Twitter, looking inside the Phillies mailbag. Just Klentak, they've made a couple of moves. They got rid of Saunders. They got rid of Gomez. They finally demoted Ramos the other day. Kind of read the tea leaves on what you think Klentak is thinking at this stage of the season.
He still doesn't want to go to the prospects yet. That's the one thing he doesn't want to do. So in a way, it's kind of like you're stuck running in place because you subtract Ramos, right, and then you go to Ricardo Pinto. Now Pinto, he's got 7 appearances in a row out of the bullpen in Lehigh Valley that he was scoreless since he became a reliever. So maybe he can help, but that doesn't seem to be the type of reinforcement that really instills any awe from the players on the team or from the fans. So I think he's content to sort of just keep the status quo for now, and then after they trade some veterans, figure it out. But the trade deadline's still almost 5 weeks away. It could be a long 5 weeks.
Sure is. You're looking at the candidates right now. Size them up a little bit. Give us a little bit of a precursor to who could be had at the deadline.
Well, I know you were talking Pat Neshek and his usage. I actually wrote something on 97.3 ESPN.com the other day where Jim Salisbury's basically reporting that there is a standing offer on the table for Pat Neshek. I think Neshek is going to be moved for sure. In fact, I think the way they're pitching him is the careful way. He's only pitched more than 1 inning, and there was 1 inning and 1 out. So that was basically the second week of May or the first week of May. They're not really testing him very much. In fact, they don't even like warming him up and not using him. If they warm him up and don't use him, then they kind of sit him down for the night. So I think they're being very protective of that asset. I think they fully plan to trade that asset. I think if Howie Kendrick's healthy enough, he's going to make a contender very happy if they can pick him up. And really, besides that, I mean, Daniel Nava could have some teams interested in him, but you're not going to get a lot for somebody like Nava, who's kind of filling that bench role. And then the bigger types of trades, which could involve the likes of Hernandez or Tommy Joseph, those are the types of things that probably happen in the off season, not at the deadline. So really, it's just those couple of veterans. If Hellickson Heath continues to pitch well like he has his last couple of times, he'll get some interest as well. But besides that, there's really not a whole lot and nothing that's going to fetch them a lot necessarily either.
All right, Frank Klose, of course, the mailbag. You can read it every Tuesday on 97.3 ESPN.com. We answer your questions here on a team that, man, is going down a historically bad path right now for this franchise, which has had a lot of bad seasons. They are having a absolutely pathetically horrible season at this stage of the game. Frank, we'll catch up again soon, pal.
Have a great day, guys.